kept by a wealthy woman and selling his dignity. He thought he could live numb for the rest of his life, until he met a girl who saw through every disguise of his and shone on him like a beam of light. So a mad idea was born. As long as the woman who imprisoned him disappeared, he could embrace light and freedom. The wealthy woman was the owner of a pharmaceutical company, and he was a university professor. To outsiders, they looked like a perfect match, but in front of the possessive wealthy woman, he had no dignity at all, like a puppet trapped in a gilded cage. So he used a carefully staged accident to let the wealthy woman quietly leave this world. When the glass of red wine was swallowed by her, his entire world fell silent. And though there was fear, there was even more relief. He put a few drops of eye solution in his eyes, came to her memorial pretending to be grief-stricken, and after deceiving everyone, he rushed to the girl without hesitation, ready to start a new life. But at the moment they embraced, the girl deliberately interrupted, and the police suddenly called. The wealthy woman's body had mysteriously disappeared. A sudden chill shot straight into his brain, and everything around him seemed to lose its sound, leaving only his hollow heartbeat. Panic instantly took over, and he hurried to the scene. At the morgue, according to the guard, someone had attacked him 2 hours earlier, and after that, the wealthy woman's body vanished. After hearing this, the professor lit a cigarette to calm his restless mind. He could not believe it. Since a state facility is not a convenience store, how could a body simply disappear? With so many bodies in the morgue, why was it hers that went missing? Now the police were instead starting to suspect there was something wrong with the body itself. Just as the argument reached a deadlock, the forensic examiner suddenly walked in. After his analysis, he suspected that the wealthy woman had not actually died, but had been injected with or mistakenly taken some kind of drug that caused total body stiffness. And after the effect wore off and she woke up, she realized someone had tried to harm her and escaped. But if that were the case, then who had attacked the guard? Although this was a possibility and clearly failed to convince the police, the analysis struck deep into the professor's mind. Though he felt uneasy, he also relaxed, because what he gave her was a newly developed drug, colorless and tasteless, and just one drop would cause death 8 hours later, and even an autopsy would only conclude a fatal heart attack. Suddenly the morgue lost power, and as the professor sat on a chair, the cabinet behind him that held her body opened on its own, revealing an extra box inside. When he opened it, not only were some of his wife's belongings inside, but the poison that should have been completely destroyed was lying there quietly. His breathing stopped instantly, because after poisoning her, he had clearly destroyed the liquid. So how could it appear in her body cabinet? At that moment, the power suddenly came back on, and he hurriedly stuffed the poison into his pocket. But this scene was caught red-handed by the police. The police demanded to search his pockets, and despite his desperate explanations, they still found it.
이거 뭐야? 이거 뭔지 모르겠고 유족한테 이래도 되는 거야, 당신?
The police prepared to send it to the forensic examiner for analysis, and the suspicious professor was kept under control. Next, based on the morgue's layout, the police ordered officers to check nearby access routes and contacted the wealthy woman's private lawyer, who was also her younger sister, to investigate the inheritance. Sure enough, officers discovered a ventilation duct outside that led directly into the building's power room. Because the electrical system had been damaged, the police could only check the road surveillance, and they discovered that apart from the funeral vehicle, police cars, and the professor's car, no other vehicles had come this way. That meant if someone took the body, it was not transported by vehicle, and if it was done on foot, the only option was to cross the mountain outside. The body was far too heavy to be carried over a mountain, so he was convinced it had to be nearby. Just as this analysis ended, the professor looked up and noticed the digital clock displaying a wrong date, July 20th, 2007. This date struck him like lightning, tearing open a crime he had buried for 15 years. Because it held a secret shared between him and the wealthy woman, he forced himself to stay calm and walked out with the police. But during their call, he heard something even more shocking. The officers investigating her sister not only found an agreement, but also received a text message from the wealthy woman, and on the mountain outside the morgue, they discovered a woman's footprint. As soon as the call ended, the morgue's smoke system suddenly activated, and the professor took the chance to hide in a nearby storage room, calling his girlfriend to tell her that the wealthy woman was very likely still alive. But before he could finish speaking, he vaguely saw her figure behind the glass door, and in the next instant, it vanished again. The date, the messages, and the footprints all pointed to one truth. The wealthy woman was not only alive, but had long known about him and his girlfriend. After drinking the poison, she injected herself with an antidote, faked her death, and let the police grow suspicious, using all this to take revenge and ruin him completely. At the same time, the forensic analysis came back, confirming that the small bottle was indeed poison. Sitting in the room at a loss, the professor suddenly heard movement at the window, and when he walked over, he found the very glass of red wine used to poison her placed there. Trembling all over, he became even more certain this was no accident, but that she had returned for revenge. At that moment, he suddenly noticed a dark figure standing behind the morgue door watching him, and when he rushed over, the figure fled in a panic. Then a phone suddenly rang from one of the body bags nearby, and he walked over, opened it, pulled out the phone, and saw that the call was from the wealthy woman. Shaking, he answered the call only to hang up immediately, and as he forced himself to unzip the bag, he found an unfamiliar elderly man inside. Before his racing heart could settle, another message arrived on the phone. "I am waiting for you at the place where we buried our secret." At this moment, the police chief also arrived with his team, and under pressure from the wealthy woman's company, he ordered the professor released immediately. Just as the case was about to come to light, the police were extremely unwilling, yet the chief even arranged for someone to arrest himself. Fortunately, the officers returned in time with new evidence from the wealthy woman's sister. Just as the professor was lost in thought and confusion, the police chief walked in, and when the professor saw him, he thought he saw hope. But instead it was terrible news. The police took out an agreement, which stated clearly that if the professor had any improper relationship with another woman, he would not receive a single penny, and his career would come to an end. The man thought all his actions and plans were flawless, yet he never imagined that the wealthy woman had seen through everything long ago, hired a private investigator to monitor him from the start, recorded everything he did, and kept all the evidence in her safe. The date of this recording was the day before the wealthy woman's death, which also proved that she was killed by the professor. The professor's mental defenses collapsed, and he ran to the restroom and began to vomit. And after barely calming himself, his phone suddenly received another message, showing photos of him and his girlfriend together. This time, he was convinced that the wealthy woman was not dead and had come back to take revenge on them. He realized his girlfriend was in danger, hurriedly called her, and told her to leave the house immediately. The girl walked into the living room and found the floor-to-ceiling window mysteriously open, and the lights suddenly went out, frightening her into a panicked escape. But when she rushed to unlock the door, she found it locked from the outside. As soon as the call ended, another message arrived. "I am waiting for you at the place where we buried our secret." The professor realized his girlfriend was in grave danger, rushed out to rescue her, but was subdued by the police with a swift takedown. Mentally shattered and worried about his girlfriend's safety, the professor finally confessed the truth. It turned out that although he lived without material worries with the wealthy woman, his life was suffocating. Her extreme need for control not only destroyed his career and blocked his path forward, but also crushed his dreams and trampled his dignity, leaving him like a puppet imprisoned in a gilded cage. Until one day, he met a girl, and her appearance was like a beam of light that illuminated his dark life. She often used the chance after class to come ask him all kinds of questions, her eyes filled with curiosity and admiration. Gradually, he grew used to this life and even looked forward to seeing her every day. And through this bright and positive girl, he saw the version of himself he had long lost, which made him completely lose control and sink deeper and deeper. While being with his girlfriend, he subconsciously began to resist the wealthy woman, knowingly stepping toward an abyss and still choosing to jump. He asked the wealthy woman to let him restart his career, but his dignity was once again trampled underfoot.
네가 지금 잘해서 그 자리에 있는 줄 아니?
미안해. 다시는 안 까먹을게.
He dared not divorce her, not because of money or power, but because the wealthy woman held a major secret over him.
그래서 죽였다는 거지?
아니요. 내가 계획한 것처럼 꾸민 거라고요.
아, 이거 다 당신이 계획한 거잖아. 독약으로 윤설이 죽인 다음 시체를 빼돌렸겠지. 그럼 부검을 할 수 없으니까 증거도 없고, 당신이 부검을 의뢰했으니까 의심도 피할 수 있었을 테고.
아니,
However, the professor insisted that she was still alive and had only faked her death, because during the development of the drug, some variant versions had appeared, and the wealthy woman must have used one of them to suspend breathing, stop the heart, and enter a state of fake death that looked exactly like real death. There were no signs of anyone living in his girlfriend's apartment.
아, 이제 그만해. 그 오피스텔 주소 보니까 박진은 당신 명의더만.
내가 구해준 거니까.
근데 아무도 안 살아.
And the professor was instantly stunned, because the school could not find any record either, and there was no such student at all, making him wonder if everything had been a hallucination born from extreme mental pressure. At this moment, the professor's mind began to collapse, and he went into a frenzy, screaming that he needed to save his girlfriend and desperately begging the police. Before the police could respond, all the shareholders of the pharmaceutical company gathered outside the door, and in the face of such power, even if the professor confessed, without concrete evidence, the authorities had no choice but to release him. Once free, the professor rushed to his car and sped away, determined to confirm his girlfriend's safety no matter whether the messages were real or not. Unaware that the police were following closely behind using tracking data, the professor arrived at her place, but the house was pitch dark with no one inside, so he hurried to the place mentioned in the message where their secret was buried. It turned out that 15 years earlier, a woman had been traveling with her younger sister after visiting their parents' graves, when something unexpected suddenly happened. The car sent the younger sister plunging off the cliff, while the older sister was thrown into the middle of the road, badly injured, and the ones who caused this accident were the wealthy woman and the professor. The professor trembled as he took out his phone to call the police, but the wealthy woman stopped him. Suddenly, the girl stood up, swaying as she tried to find her younger sister, but because her injuries were too severe, she collapsed heavily once again. To cover up their crime, they dragged her into the car, drove deep into the mountains, wrapped her in white cloth, dug a deep pit, and pushed her inside. At this moment, following the message to save his girlfriend, the professor arrived at the secret location, and as expected, a beam of light appeared behind him. However, the person who arrived was not the wealthy woman, but the police. The police walked up to the professor, knocked him to the ground with a punch, and then took out a photograph.
송지영, 내 옛날 애인. 제대로 봐. 예쁘지? 지영이 부모님 기일이었어.
It turned out that everything had been a trap set by the police. He had knocked the guard unconscious, secretly entered the morgue, loaded the body into the trunk, then used a cigarette butt to ignite a trash can to trigger the smoke system, deliberately placed a phone in a body bag, sent messages, and used the convenience of his position to guide the professor step by step, making him believe the wealthy woman was not dead, all to find the place where his wife was buried. With the truth fully exposed, the professor confessed to his crimes, but in the end, he still pleaded for his girlfriend.
선생님, 아무 잘못 없어요. 그냥 살려주세요.
Hearing this, the police revealed a look of disdain. It turned out that the professor's girlfriend was the little girl who had been knocked to the ground in that accident many years ago. She did not die after being hit, and although she was rescued, she lost her memory. The wife seemed to vanish from the world, and the only witness lead was completely cut off. From then on, the police officer fell into despair and lived his days in a daze, until that day, when he met the wife's younger sister, Hygiene, again, and she took out a magazine from her backpack, with a pharmaceutical brand logo that was exactly the same as the one on the car that night. By checking vehicle maintenance records step by step, The police finally confirmed that the people responsible for the accident were the powerful, wealthy woman and the professor. Even after identifying the culprits, he was just a small-time police officer. How could he possibly fight against them? Even with solid evidence, they would only be held briefly and released, and in that case, the wife's body would never be found. So Hygiene pretended to be a college student and deliberately approached the professor, letting him sink deeper and deeper, drawing herself into the plan as well. And before the professor destroyed the poison, she secretly kept a bottle, and before he went to the police station, she quietly made him drink it. And by this moment, a full 8 hours had already passed. It turned out that the beam of light was actually a fire of revenge that had been restrained for 15 years. The police also dug up the wife's body based on the location, and when the professor woke up, the area was already surrounded, and he was arrested. But the pain coming from his arm made the police notice something unusual, because the police officer driven by revenge ultimately still injected him with an antidote. Yet a strange expression appeared on the officers' faces. The police also uncovered the wealthy woman's body from the pit, which confirmed the evidence that the professor had killed her and disposed of the body. After that, the police found illegal substances in the professor's home, and combined with the needle marks on his arm, the famous university professor became a disgraced addict. With the truth revealed and the revenge complete, the police left the city quietly with Hygiene, and the story came to an end. Although everything was brought to light, some wounds are carved into time and will never truly heal. The police officer lost the one he loved most. Hygiene lost her sister. The professor lost his life as he knew it, and the wealthy woman lost her life. Sometimes, when a beam of light shines into a place it never should have reached, what it brings is not salvation, but faster destruction. He thought he was the one moving the pieces, but when the board suddenly flipped, he realized he was only a piece himself. Justice may move slowly, but it never misses, and time is always the greatest detective, and the fairest judge of all.